Welcome to the Knowledge for Men show. Your life will never be the same.
Your level of success will seldom exceed your level of personal development.
I want to die empty of regret. I want to die empty of my best work. We don't understand who we are. Instead, we're living out somebody else's narrative.
What one man can do, another man can do. If it's been done, it can be done again.
Being yourself and being your truest, most authentic self in every moment. If it scares you or makes you a little afraid, do it. Follow your heart and your gut.
The first stage, I think, is finding you, like finding out who I am today.
Stuff will not work. You will have things that fail. Success is when you're a happy, fulfilled person. How do you define success?
It's your life, and you are the creator of the movie script that is your life story.
The father of personal development, Jim Rohn, said it best. You are the average of the 5 people you spend your most time with. And so I've created a mastermind community called the Lion's Den around this idea that if you are surrounded by high-performing people and you have consistent education and training, then you will succeed in life and as a man. Check out kfmlion.com to learn how the Lion's Den can take your life, relationships, and business to the next level. Again, that's kfmlion.com. All right, guys, welcome to the show. I'm here with Biehn. He's the founder of Thought Horizon and has published a book on workplace innovation titled The 30-Year Paycheck, Destruction and Redemption in Corporate America, which is going to be the focus of today's episode. So, Sander, happy to have you here on the show today.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. So let's dive right in and let's go in with a favorite success quote or a saying that you've lived by and explain to the audience why.
Well, I don't think it's a saying that I've always lived by, but it's one that's much more. And that is, it's a Latin phrase, and it's fortuna fortis audeat. And what it means is fortune favors the bold. So it's a saying that I like to live by. It sort of says that, hey, if you go all out into something, fortune will favor whatever it is you're up to.
All right. And I think that kind of gives us a little bit about, I think that'll apply in with the book, kind of tailor into that. So let's learn more about how this book started and what led you to create this book. So go ahead and spend some time here, take the mic and talk about how you got started.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. So, I got out of college. I graduated in 1990. Hopefully I'm not dating myself too much for your listenership, but I started
No, not at all.
I started into what I called the unexpected career. And, I had a liberal arts degree from college, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what I was going to do out of college. And I thought about going into teaching because that was about the only thing I was destined or able to do because because I had reliable transportation, I was able to get into this other career called sales. And so I started working in sales. That wasn't something I was thinking I wanted to do. That's not something I wanted to do necessarily, but I started doing it. And, time just slipped by on me. And I found myself still working in sales after many, many, many years. And so, what happened was I had seen basically sales had not changed over many, many years. And, after about 20 years, I started thinking to myself, this can't be it. There's got to be something more to this. I had noticed over 20 years, things started to rhyme. Things like, I really don't like my boss, or sitting at the bar with guys, talking about, why is it that the company doesn't care about us? Or talking to somebody in a meeting and finding out I have this really good idea how we can make things a lot better for the company, but nobody seems to want to listen to me. And, I started learning little lessons along the way on how to basically live out a little bit more and do the things that, I wanted to do, to be innovative in what I was doing and to feel a little bit more fulfilled about it. And I had no interest at all in writing a book. That wasn't anything on my wish list or my bucket list at all. But, as I started to travel and go places, every place I went, I started overhearing, how you eavesdrop on conversations when you're at the airport and stuff like that. Yeah, people tend to say the same things about their boss. I mean, it's always like, you don't hear people say, I've got this great boss and I just love her. She just does a great job. She's always giving me compliments. No, you're always hearing about how terrible things are. And you never hear I work for the greatest company in the world and the company is so caring. They're always listening to my ideas and validating, my good ideas and helping me to grow as a human being. You never hear that. You hear people talking about being stifled and feeling stifled. And so, I sort of stepped back a little bit and I looked back on these 20 some odd years that I've been working in sales. And I said, you know what? I think there's actually a story here. And it's not a story that's necessarily going to come off with a hero fights his way into the jungle and makes it big, right out of the gate. It's more of a story that kind of brews, one that sort of looks at, hey, it sometimes takes some time, but after a while you start to learn things in life. You hit a point of wisdom, as I like to call it. And so this is what kind of prompted me to write this book. And the book runs a narrative, if you will, a person entering the workforce out of college and sort of what happens to them and how they sort of lose some of the things that the spark and the things that they hold really dear when they're in college. And they kind of like fall into kind of a rut a little bit, and kind of what that person does to get out of that rut, and speaks about it in an informative way that I think will help people who feel that same way. And from what I can gather, that's a lot of us.
It sounds like a common tale that a lot of guys experience. You set out to do something after college, and then you end up in sales trying to.
Absolutely.
I was just gonna say, it sounds like the common tale. You end up in sales because you're trying to pay the bills and pay off the student loans, and then next thing you know, 10 years goes by, 20 years go by. And why is it that people stay in a job that, if they're just complaining, they're not really excited, they're not really passionate about it? Why do you think guys are staying in jobs that they're not necessarily passionate about?
Well, for me, it was really two things, right? So the first one was money. Sales especially. Sales has this thing called commission, and guys, you can earn more money. And I think many men start to hang their hat on how much money they make. And one of the things was, in 1990. When I graduated from college, I was making more money after about 2 years than almost anybody I knew. And that included, people who were still in medical school who would soon to earn a lot more than me, or lawyers for that matter. Even the ones that were right out of law school, I was earning more than some of them because I was making this good money. But, there's nothing wrong with sales at all. I mean, I've been in sales my whole life, and there's a lot of things I like about sales. But I think sometimes if you're good at something, you just stick with it. And just because you're good at something, it doesn't mean it's the thing that you want to do. The other thing I think, Andrew, that would be interesting for your listeners to hear is that for me, I got married rather young, and my wife was actually in law school. And an interesting thing happened to me. After my wife got out of law school, I kept thinking, I can ditch this career and sit back and figure out what it is I really want to do in my life once my wife gets into a law career. And then she decided after she got done with law school that she didn't want to practice law. And so she went in and took a job, a kind of a low-paying job. It was still an attorney's job, but it was a lower-paying job. And, I felt the need that I needed to keep bringing in the bacon, be the breadwinner in the family. And then along came the children, and I think I stayed in it for those reasons as well. But the one thing that I wasn't caring to during that period of my life, and it really took up about 20 years, was I wasn't caring for my own self. And not that, as men, I think we are programmed to not be selfish, especially when it comes to being the breadwinner and these types of things. Right. We're programmed to, to kind of sacrifice a little bit, I think. But while we do that, we start taking away certain aspects of ourselves. If we're not living out our own passion, really, how can we end up being passionate towards the people we love when we come home at the end of the day? That's number one. And number two, when children come into play, which did for me, at some point my kids started reaching towards the teenage year, and I thought, what am I showing them in the fact that I'm staying with a job that maybe I'm not passionate about and not living out what my passions and dreams are?
That's a common scenario. What do you think you could have done in that scenario if you were to revert back to when you started having children? I mean, at that point, it makes perfect sense for you to be the breadwinner, to be the provider. It's you have a family now, you have a wife. It's not like you can just quit your job, travel the world, and become some online marketer. It's like you have to pay the bills. You have to have a home for your family. So it is a tough situation to be in as a man. Like,
yeah, well, the funny thing about it all is that, so now my children are 11 and 14. And about a year, it's been just exactly a year ago, I quit working for a Fortune 10, large firm where I had worked for 20 years because I always felt that they were going to take care of me, and started doing something that's much more my passion. And my passion lies in, helping in sales organizations around social media. We can talk about that. But, I quit and I walked out onto, the ice, as I like to call it. Started walking out onto the ice very carefully and wondering whether I'm still going to be able to provide for my family. And the amazing thing that happens, and I believe that there's a truth here, And I'm not suggesting that, if you're passionate about, I don't know, arranging flowers and you've got a job at a bank and you've got a huge mortgage on a house and you've got a second house in another town and a few cars and all sorts of other bills, you can't just decide, hey, I'm going to go become a florist, the next day. But if you intelligently start living out your passion, finding a way to bridge into that passion, I believe that what happens is you're going to intrinsically be better at what you do than really anybody else, because you'll be living out who you are. And it's a little bit of what happened to me and what I talk about inside the 30-year paycheck. I just see so many people who live in a state of fear, and they're figuring like, well, someday I'll retire. Someday I'll be able to do what I want. Well, that someday's got to be now, because we really don't have in aggregate all that many days on this earth. And so this is really it. This is the time to do what it is that you want to do.
So you said you walked into the ice. So you quit your job that was paying you well, and you didn't have another source of income. Is that right?
Well, yeah, okay, so let's talk about it. What happened was this. I started thinking about building this business, and I actually hired a business coach, and I still had an income from my old company, right? And she sort of told me to stay with the old company while I built my plans kind of on the side, and I did that. And then I started reaching out to prospective clients in ways that, hey, might you be interested in this service that I was thinking about providing? And once I found a couple people who were getting pretty close to wanting to sign on the dotted line, then I walked away. So I would say that I did what I was just speaking about before. I did it intelligently. I don't think that really, if you want to be a race car driver, you can't just quit your job and then just go out and finance a race car and start driving it around. You have to think about, like, how are you going to bridge from the one thing into the other intelligently. But I think that the most important thing is that you do it. It's not a matter of, maybe I should do that, or maybe someday I'll do that, or I'll do that when I have, this much money in the bank. I think you need to start moving towards that goal every day in every way.
Yeah. So you started creating a runway. You were doing coaching, so that's really smart, while you have income, so you're getting the education that you needed and the support. And then you were starting to build a runway for yourself so that when it was time to make that leap, you've been creating for quite some time by the time you quit.
Absolutely. And the other thing I would suggest to people, and I talk about this in the book as well, is I lived below my means. And so in that sales role, and part of it was because I'd been laid off a number of times. And I talk about that in the book too, and how that feels. But, having gone through that, I mean, by mistake, I had been living below my means, and I had saved up some money. So it's really important to be in that kind of position. You can't say, well, my dream is to go do X, whatever that thing is, and at the same time want to live in a house and drive a car and have all the amenities that cost you what you to do something else in order to afford, right? So you need to start thinking, like, if I'm going to go do this, especially in a startup mode, I need to get my expenses lower. And so there's no question that another thing that people need to do. And by doing that, really what you do is you start taking away the fear of walking away from your current income and what you have. People will tell you, oh my gosh, I can't believe you did that. But really, it was in some ways the simplest thing I've ever done. And in other ways, it's been the most rewarding.
Yeah. When I was in a corporate position, I decided that I wanted to quit about 7 months into my job. I was managing a retail store right after college. And I started, like you said, I immediately started saving up money to build a runway so I could pay my bills. And also I started living extremely frugally. And then I started selling a bunch of stuff that I owned. So I just started removing everything, all this stuff that was just laying around. I was selling on eBay and Craigslist, and I was saving up money. And when I made the leap, that was when things really started to happen. It was when I quit, started going full time. But the core message that I'm getting is start planning, and then
exactly.
Have something going before instead of just I quit and then running away, and it's exciting for a few days, and then you're like, oh crap, how do I live now?
Exactly. And I think you hit the nail on the head though by saying that when you were looking to do something, you were living with purpose. And it's amazing what happens when you start living with purpose. You end up really seeing the world for what it is, and seeing what it is that you want to do and go after it. I mean, for so many years, and I talk about this a little bit in my book as well, I've watched people somehow just miraculously go up the corporate ladder and make it straight into these wonderful positions all the time. And I always kept trying to fake my way into that. Like I would try to act like them or do what it was that they did in order to make my way up the ladder. But what I didn't realize was all I wanted was the power and the money. And it wasn't that I wanted that job. It wasn't that I was going to be good at that upper level job. And at one point, I did get promoted into a director level job where I was in charge of a number of salespeople. And not that I was bad at the job, but it really wasn't what I wanted to do. And I was doing it to check a box. And the way in which I ended up managing these people was I was managing them in the way in which I thought my boss, the VP, wanted me to manage these people. And it was an absolute disaster. So, my point is that, the people who go up those chains, sometimes they're reaching their goals because this is what it is that they want to do. And if it's not in your heart to do it, then, all the money in the world is not a good reason for you to waste the precious time that you actually have in your career doing something that's not living out your passion and living out your dreams.
Yeah, very powerful statement there. Now, even if someone was to start planning, 6 months in advance, to start saving money, they're selling things, they have a nice, comfortable savings that they built for themselves, and they started doing things like what you were doing, started prospecting clients beforehand. Even then, how did you handle the fear of starting a new business and not knowing where your next check is going to come from when you had a wife and it sounded like you had some kids on the way at that time?
No, I had two kids at the time. So, I'll tell you, it's scary. It's very scary. And, I spent a lot of nights sort of awake. And, the first few months when I started my business, I go through the gamut of emotions every day. At some point during the day, I would feel incredibly wonderful and euphoric. And I'd also feel, incredibly depressed and sad and worried and nervous about what the future was going to hold. But a couple things really helped me out. I mean, one was, exercise. I think getting constant exercise and doing that exercise outside, for me, getting outside is really important. It kind of puts things back into perspective because you see what's going on around you. And, the other thing I'll say is, my wife was very supportive of what I was doing. And, she spends a lot of time being my unofficial psychologist, sitting there while I'm on the couch at night and helping me through, it's going to be okay. This is the right thing to do. And so, that really helped as well. And then finally having a lot of friends. And I searched out, and when I first started thinking about building this new business, I went on tour and I went to a lot of conferences and spoke about what it was that I was going to be offering. And through that, I met a lot of other entrepreneurs, people who've been in the same situation. And what you find is that it's really far less scary than you think it is. But for anybody who spent a lot of time inside of a corporate structure like I had, where every single other week I'm getting money transferred into my account. I'll tell you, in 2014, I went 6 months without seeing a check from anybody for anything. And that's a really weird situation you find yourself in, especially if you're used to following a regular paycheck. But so much of it has been upside for me. I can't explain it, especially after 20 years, writing the book and publishing the book last year. For me, was an absolute thrill. I feel like something I've always wanted, it's always sort of been in me, something that I wanted to talk about. And honestly, I feel like I'm getting a second chance from that day when I graduated from college and said sure to that sales job to 20 years later and being locked in and feeling very much locked into what I was doing.
It sounds like you were able to handle those mixed emotions after quitting the job by taking care of your health and having a support system, by surrounding yourself with the right people who pushed you forward.
Yeah, I think it's super important. And especially I'm very lucky. I've got a wonderful partner in life, and we've been married going on 22 years now. So that's honestly, that's been a good thing. But she also put up with me through all the years while I complained about the job that I was doing. So she's very good at remembering, and I think any friend would do this for you, to say, listen, all I ever hear you do is complain about work, and now you're doing something about it. This is great. Go for it. Do it. I support you. And, that's really helpful to have someone just give you that, hey, I've been watching you, and I see you're not happy with what you're doing, This is making you happy. So quit worrying about it and just go for it. Those are great words to hear from somebody. And I think that there are a lot of people in corporate America who could benefit from somebody, those kind words coming from a friend, from anybody.
Absolutely. And just kind of reflecting back on the 20 years in sales and in corporate America and kind of like the mundane routine lifestyle, and then now where you are now, like how would you compare your life in terms of like just being more, I guess I just want to say being more alive?
Exactly how it feels.
When you're really doing something that you feel like you're meant.
Right, exactly. And that's how it feels. I feel a lot more alive. I feel like I'm living out a purpose that I have of some sort. Like while I don't feel like I have some destiny that's inside of me that I've always had to tap into, I'm not somebody who necessarily believes in that. But I do feel like I'm actually searching my way through the world in a way that's got my eyes wide open. I think when I was just waiting for that next paycheck and hoping for a retirement, I think I was wasting some of my own time. And, for me, being on my own has enabled me to see this, to have more, like I said before, have my eyes wide open. But, that's not to say that everybody out there should quit their corporate job and go do what I did. I don't believe that even for a moment, and I don't talk about that at all in my book. What I kind of say is that you just need to live out what it is you want to do and be yourself, and you can do that inside of a corporate setting and without feeling afraid. Because in the end, there's nothing to be afraid of. I think that people tend to feel safe when they're in corporate environment and corporate setting. They feel like the company is going to take care of them, but all you have to do is open the newspaper to see that that's not necessarily the case. So I think that, we fool ourselves a little bit. Honestly, if you live at least with those eyes wide open, knowing that anything could happen any day and that you should play out whatever it is that you can bring to the table, and whether that's in a staff meeting, whether that's innovation that you've thought of that maybe you should bring to your vice president or to your CEO for that matter and say, hey, look, we could really change the world with this, right up to doing what I did, which is to say I've got an innovation and I want to bring it to the world on my own and going out and doing that. We shouldn't be afraid to do any of those things. And that's sort of the moral, and that's the thrust of what I talk about.
I like that you brought up that, you're not advocating everyone just right now, like just, all right, plan your resignation, because maybe there is an opportunity within that organization that would fulfill them, or there is something that they can do within that company. So I do appreciate that. And for the time's sake, let's now move into the knowledge round. I'll just ask you a few more rapid fire questions here. So are you ready for the knowledge round, Sander?
I'm not sure if I am, because I've listened to this one so many times in your podcast, but I'll see if I can do a good job of it.
All right. Okay. Do you feel stuck, alone, or like you're not getting the type of results you think you deserve? You put in all the hard work in your life, relationships, and business, but things just aren't getting any better? I've been there. That's how I started. That's where I was. I kept trying to improve my life, but nothing just seemed to give. I started to think that personal development was a joke. I felt like every month I was in the same place I was the previous month. But then I found something that just worked. I grew, my business grew, my relationships flourished, and everything around me just started to click. People started respecting me more, and I finally felt like I was becoming the man I wanted to be. I created a program to help guys get the same results in their life. Check out kfmline.com to learn how the Lion's Den can radically transform your life. Again, that's kfmline.com. Welcome to the Knowledge Round, where the guests will be asked rapid-fire questions to give the audience invaluable pieces of wisdom to help transform their lives. Starting in 3, 2, 1, showtime. First question, Sander, is what advice would you give to someone who's feeling lost or unsure of their purpose? What they should do with their life?
Yeah, what I'd tell that person is they should step back and ask themselves how they're feeling about what they're doing at the moment. I mean, what is it, and maybe even go back in time a little bit and ask themselves, what is it that I originally wanted to do? For me, that was really powerful, and that's why when in my book, when I wrote it, I started from college, because I remembered there was a kernel in me that said, back in college, I seemed to know what my purpose was. I seemed to know where I was going. And I'm not saying that's the same for everybody, but I would say to anybody who feels like they've lost their purpose to go back in time and sort of feel out when was it that they knew what they wanted to do, and start asking themselves some hard questions. And what did I do from there? What didn't I do? It might put them back in touch with where it is that they want to go next.
I like it. I like it. And Sander, what was holding you back from becoming the man you are now today?
Yeah, what was holding me back is I always was trying to be somebody else. I figured if I could just emulate properly somebody else, I thought I'm smart. If I can just be like that vice president, I would end up being that vice president. And what I didn't realize all along was that being me was actually the supremely best thing that I could do. And that anything that I could be personally was going to be enough. It was going to be enough for me. It was going to be enough for my family. And really, it was going to be enough for the world. And we each bring such special gifts. We have to know that we're good enough. And absolutely, that's my take on it.
I like that. And briefly, what are some of your most influential books that you've read that have helped you on your journey?
Well, I'm kind of a well-rounded reader, and
this is a tough question.
I read all.
Okay.
So this is a tough one in some ways.
Yeah.
But it's like I've just been on the road for 8 weeks in a row, right? And I've read, and I told my daughter I read 8 books in 8 weeks, and I've read everything from The Sheltering Sky from Paul Bowles to Zero to One by was it Dan Thiel? I think it might have the first name wrong. The guy,
Peter Thiel.
Yeah, guy who did PayPal. So I have a varied and eclectic ideas, but really both of those books I like a lot. The Sheltering Sky is about some 20 or something people who feel like not much purpose in their life, and they go diving into the wilds of North Africa. And it can be sort of a depressing book, but it can also be kind of an enlightening book to make you think about your life. And Zero to One, which I just finished recently, I like that book because it really talks about what it takes to be an entrepreneur, and it talks how important it is in this world that we get good at creating new things, that's really where it's at, and that there are a lot of big problems that need to be solved in the world. So Zero to One's another one that I read recently that I like.
All right. I was actually just listening to Zero to One in the car not too long ago. The information he gives in that book, I just couldn't believe such good content in just a $10 book. Now, moving forward, Sander, what would you tell your 20-year-old self if you had 60 seconds with him? Real quick, you had 60 seconds with your 20-year-old self. What would you tell him to do, and what would you tell him not to do?
It's funny you asked that question, and honestly, it starts making me almost tear up because I would grab myself really, really hard, and I just say, wake up, this is it, do it now. Like, I'll tell you, I always thought that it would be cool to go around the country and play in a rock and roll band, not to be famous, but just be the guy that comes around in a van with a couple other guys and rocks out in your town before moving on someplace else. I wish I had done that. And honestly, right now I'm talking to you from in front of my guitar lesson, my guitar teacher, his shop, because I've decided this year also to take guitar lessons. I'm bringing that back in. So I would tell myself, do your passion. Go and do what you want to do. Don't worry about the money. Don't worry about this future or to be competitive with the other people you're graduating with. Just go for it. Do what it is that you need to do.
I can feel the passion through these earbuds right now, so I'm personally being moved, and this is just a great conversation here. Now that'll conclude the knowledge round there. So just briefly, what's really exciting you today? Kind of want to bring it to the modern day. Like, what is Sander doing? What's getting him out of bed in the morning?
Yeah, so I'm doing social media these days, but frankly, I'm all about just change in general and innovation in the workplace. I think that the workplace is in so many ways outmoded, and I think a lot of millennials out there are seeing this, that, really there's this whole command and control structure that says, we need to have lots of people be the underlings and then a few people at the top telling them what to do. But the world's changed because of technology. Information flows much more readily, and that really gives us an incredible opportunity to tap into all the gray matter and the brains and the creativity and the thinking of all the people who before, their only job was to create the widgets and push the buttons on the machine. These people now are in a position to innovate, to make changes on the fly, and to make the world a lot better, a lot faster. So, that's what excites me right now. And I'm getting after that with some of the consulting work that I do today with clients. And it's an awesome opportunity.
All right. I love it. I love it. And this has been a great episode. So how can my audience follow up with you?
Yeah, so my social media work is at www.thought-horizon.com. But what I'm doing these days heavily as well is marketing my book, which is The 30-Year Paycheck. You can find out about the 30-Year Paycheck there, or you can check it out on Amazon. And when you type it in, it'll say the 30-year, and then you'll see war. Well, just keep typing and put paycheck, and you will find my book.
I'm actually on Amazon, so I did that. Yeah, war comes up. You gotta put paycheck. All right, Sander, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for giving me these invaluable lessons that we're just gonna pass on to several thousand people in just a 30-day period. We're gonna touch close to 8,000 lives. So this is great. I'm glad that we connected here today. So appreciate your time.
Great, and looking forward to connecting with the audience as well, and looking forward to future podcasts with you.
All right, Sander, we'll cut it there. Are you doing a guitar lesson? Is that what's next? Because it sounded like... Thank you for listening to the Knowledge for Men podcast. Hundreds of interviews and 1 million downloads later, we're continuing to build an international movement, and we've just started. So if you enjoyed this episode, go ahead and leave a review in iTunes. It really helps to grow the podcast. Guys, 2015 is the official year of living with purpose, where every day you do only the things that matter to you. You wake up, live with purpose, and take massive action towards the life you want. Check out kfmfree.com to get free tools I've created to help you crush life. Again, that's kfmfree.com. This is your host, Andrew Farabee, and I'll see you in the next episode.